here's our classwork for today. And I brought music so we don't have to sit and be quiet. And most of the questions are all about interpretation. So the code is written for you. It's going to be a good exercise to read through this, run the code, and practice interpreting the output. So I've tried to select some areas that I want us to focus on based on what we've read and what we've learned this week. This is the scenario. We have a healthcare company that has thousands of employees spread out all over, and they believe in hiring the best talent and retaining the best talent for as long as possible. So their goal is to try to identify which employees are going to be likely to leave the company so that some interventions can be made. And just like with our customer churn example, it's usually much more expensive to hire and train a new employee than it is to keep a current employee. So there's a lot of interest in making sure that the employees who are likely to leave are correctly identified by a model that we develop. So our objective is to identify the different factors that drive attrition and to build a model that will help us predict whether or not employees will fight. This is the data set, the variable definitions. So lots and lots of variables here. So our goal is to try to figure out which ones are most helpful. I think you can expand sections. This is a view. There's a lot of code here, so if I just click view and expand sections, all of them will be expanded at once, or you can do them a little bit at a time. So you're going to see a lot of libraries are being imported. We're reading in the data. There's a lot of time spent on data visualization and exploring the variables. Some of the interpretations are written, so it can take a little time to read through this and understand it. Like some of the code is pretty specialized and sophisticated, but you want to take a little time to understand how it's working if you can. So the problems are 1 through 5, and in each case I've added a little bit of an example of what we're looking for. So in problem 1, for example, you're asked to take a look at the output and try to put that into words. And I tried to leave spaces where you can fill in the blanks. Okay? And so double-clicking on the text is going to give you the ability to type in your responses. So wherever you see some dashed lines, that's a place to add some text. So this is a little bit of a departure from what we did last week, where we really focused on code. This week we're really going to focus more on the interpretations and making sense of the results. So I'll give us some time to explore this. And then we'll reserve some time at the end to see what kinds of questions have come up. Talk a little bit about this scenario and what we've learned about employee attrition based on all of the variables that are under consideration. And just make sure to save a copy in Drive, and then it's going to be submitted just like we've done in the past with a link. All right, well, I think we're just going to finish up here today. So if you're able to go through some of the interpretations, that's great. Otherwise, you can continue to refine the responses here and think about, what recommendations, what's the big focus of this project is what recommendations can you think of? And there's a lot of possibilities here. After looking through some of the exploratory data analysis and then the feature importance based on the model, those things can inform what kinds of recommendations you might make to the company based on the analysis. So I'm curious, I just wanted to ask one question here related to what we were talking about before with the, well, let me get to the confusion matrix. And I wanted to think about a little bit with you guys. What do you think the company wants to focus on with the model? Considering the fact that they are trying to predict whether or not an employee will leave the company, you can have four possibilities for an employee relative to the predictions and what actually happens, right? So the model can predict that someone will leave the company and they actually don't, right? The model can predict that someone won't leave the company and they actually do. And then, of course, we can have correct predictions. But of those two, what seems like the more serious scenario? Predicting someone will leave and that they don't, or predicting someone won't leave and then they actually do. Yeah, right. So the model fails to predict that someone is going to leave the company and they actually are someone who's going to leave the company. Then what are the consequences for the business, for the company? What would they face in that scenario? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I'm thinking, right? So scheduling the interviews, maybe there's some training that's necessary when a new employee is hired. So failing to identify employees who are likely to leave is the more critical scenario in this circumstance. So because then the company loses that opportunity to try some interventions to encourage that employee to stay. So whenever we're doing a project like this, where we're examining the model's performance, we're going to want to think about, well, what is the more serious case? Because then there are some options in terms of how we make those decisions. We learned in our last class that we can, instead of predicting whether or not an employee is going to leave the company, or we did this with customer churn, we can predict with a probability. So we could make some decisions about what probability would be our